Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Schmidt, Director of Utility Solutions here at Unearth Technologies. On the behalf of the entire Unearth team, welcome to today's Fireside Chat. We're here to discuss a very important topic for utilities. How do you innovate and remain competitive during this period of unprecedented change? Joining us today is Darsweil Rogers, co-founder and managing partner of CFP Innovations, an innovative advisory firm focused on helping its clients build agile and performance-driven organizations. With over 30 years of experience, Darsweil has been involved in all types of industries, including financial services, manufacturing, hospitality, and of course, utilities. Notably, he served two 4-year terms as commissioner of the Fayetteville Public Works Commission, including two 1-year terms as its commissioner, or as its commission chair. Fayetteville Public Works Commission is an electric and water utility based in Fayetteville, North Carolina, that serves over 120,000 customers. In his role as consultant to utilities, Darsweil advises executives and business leaders in organizational development, leadership, risk management, and competition. Darsweil also hosts a weekly radio show, Growing Your Business Today. Here to share his experience and wisdom is my guest, Darsweil Rogers. Darsweil, welcome. So happy you're able to join us.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So getting started here, obviously this is a session about competition. So, it wasn't that long ago to use the idea of using the word competition and utility in the same sentence would be ludicrous. Obviously, things have changed. Maybe give us an idea of the competitive landscape for utilities today.
Sure. I think if you go all the way back, and it's a 100-plus year history, the initial idea, which still is true for most utilities, is who owns the wire to the customer's location owns the customer. If that's not the case, it has been, okay, I own the wire to the customer. They may be buying the energy from someone else, but they're still using my wires to get to that customer. And as a result, there's some revenue or some benefit that's flowing. The competitive landscape is such that the customer can make the decision that, you know what, I don't need to buy energy from you, or I need you as a standby or a temporary solution in the event of an emergency. Now, we're in the genesis of this sort of thinking, but it's coming, and generally speaking, I see that it's coming a lot more rapidly than a lot of people are appreciating. And by the way, that customer is saying, not only won't I need you or not need you as much as you have assumed, but I might want to sell you some energy, which also has a significant implication in terms of the landscape that the utility industry sees itself.
Right. So, and what's the implication of that? Obviously, everybody understands that there's, all types, it used to be just a power plant that would send the electricity to you. And obviously things have changed with having people generating their electricity on top of their houses and whatnot. And so obviously things have changed, but what's the implication of that to the utilities?
Yeah, well, you've got a bunch of implications. First off, and you did mention the home, but I really think that the real concern and the opportunity is with your large industrial and retail customers. They have the ability to make that significant investment that can take out percentages of your load. So, you've got a primary load that you're assuming that you've got, and I'll use a major manufacturer that is a 24/7 user of energy. They use energy at a level, and particularly frequently they have either rooftop or they've got land where they can make a decision as to how they allocate that, either for solar and for batteries, so that they're going to decide, hey, I can do this more cheaply than you can sell it to me. So the implications are loss of load, so loss of revenue, loss of profitability. Your cost structure all of a sudden looks radically different than you assumed. And if you are on the municipal side, the implications are you've got communities that are dependent upon the profit from their electric systems to fund a lot of their other activities. If you're an investor owned, it's straight out of earnings per share. And the co-ops have kind of similar challenges. So what you're really talking about here is a need to be proactive with those customers. What is the customer thinking about? Where are their plans? And we've been in a position as an industry to think about ourselves as, hey, what do we need to focus on? Reliable, low-cost service. If we're reliable and we're low cost, we're good. Well, that mindset of I'm selling a commodity to an end user that has to buy it from me is shifting. And again, I believe it's going to shift a lot more rapidly than a lot of people in the industry assume.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that that's affecting the investment into assets, such as power generation and things? Is that somehow tying into the issues that we've seen recently with outages and not enough power to accommodate needs of users?
Well, let me take the question around, does it, how should it impact the way you make this investment? I think it's critically important to have those conversations with your customers, your existing customers. From an economic development perspective, there are companies coming into your region. What are their intentions? In the region I'm in, Amazon has announced that they're putting in a new facility. They've been clear. Their vehicles, they're bringing in 200 vehicles for delivery. They're all going to be EVs. Okay, so there's a positive impact on the grid in terms of, hey, we're going to end up with this additional electric usage, and they're going to run it off peak, right? What are my other customers doing? You've got a major industrial company out there. You want to be proactively talking to them about what are your plans. Maybe if they're going to put in some battery and solar, you want to have an agreement with them on the front end in terms of maybe we want to buy part of your distributed energy, or at least we want to know about it because it can impact the investments I'm making in terms of my assumptions in terms of what I need in terms of capacity or what it is that I need to buy. The other piece here is that setting aside the ability for the customer to generate their own power with smart devices, their ability to proactively manage their energy use in ways that are real positive from the point of view of shaving peak. But if you're not understanding where your customer is and you're building financial models on assumptions that are not tied to what what the industry is telling you, again, you're fraught with challenges. And as an industry, we're not used to really having those sort of conversations with customers.
Yeah. So in an earlier discussion, Darsweil, you had talked about what you see as the vision for the future. Maybe vision isn't really the right word, but where you see these changes possibly going for utilities, maybe in the far future, maybe the not distant future, but maybe if you could just share with our guests a little bit about what you see as a possible future as all this
Sure.
plays out.
I think the real thing, and it's the cautionary tale, which is that if you look at the forecast, because we all know that distributed energy is coming. We all know that solar and battery and these devices that I've mentioned are coming on stream. And we have seen the analysts' assessments of the pace in which that's likely to happen. If you were to go back the last 10 years and look at what the forecasts were for those costs over the last 10 years, you would find that generally speaking, they have underestimated how rapidly the transition was going to take or the cost was going to fall. And so when I've had conversations with thought leaders in the industry about the future, and they'll tell me what their forecasts are, I say, okay, but tell me what were the last forecasts that you told people about? And they kind of look sheepishly and say, yeah, well, those were wrong. It's going to move a lot quicker. So number one in this question about the future is coming sooner than you assume. And what are the implications? What will that mean in terms of your decision making if it happens more quickly? That future is, in my simple terms, that utilities can become what I'll call an energy management solutions company. So you're going to proactively get in there with the customer, and you're going to help them put in storage. You're going to proactively help them shave peak. You're going to proactively help them with solar. You're going to proactively help them with these smart devices. And so and what's wonderful is that, particularly with AMI meters, there's all this data that's coming into the utility today that we can use to proactively help our customers be a lot smarter about the future. But today, so many utilities, I went to a conference recently where there was a policymaker that actually asked, why are AMI meters important? Okay, so this was a municipal utility. So, and again, these are elected officials. They're not on top of this sort of thing. But you've got from the extreme of, what is an AMI meter to, hey, I'm glad I have these AMI meters. What they really help me do is to turn my customers on and off efficiently. To, I can learn some information that will help me to manage and distribute my fixed cost structure. But we're not going all the way to the next phase of how do I proactively engage with the customer to have a two-way relationship whereby they're coming to me wanting me to help them with the solutions for their energy costs versus going to a Google or an Amazon or someone else, and I've basically been cut out or disintermediated out of that relationship.
Right. So just for our audience, could you just clarify what AMI meters are and the significance?
Yes. So an AMI meter is a smart meter. So it's a device that allows there to be real time or as close to real time feedback between the customer and the utility in terms of what their usage is, in terms of whether or not their energy is on or off. So you can literally call up a utility today and say, hey, I'd like to start service. And within minutes of you having made that request, they can turn it on. In the past, somebody would have to drive out to your house to flip a switch at
Right.
your location. So this is technology at work that has saved a lot of time and effort.
Great. And as I understand, also with the smart meters, the electric utility can tell which power is off and on during a storm, so they might have a better idea of what outages, so that I
Yes.
don't need to call the utility anymore and say, hey, my power's out. They already know that. Is that correct?
Not only does it help in terms of the utility knowing by customer what's on and off, but in the event of storms, we're able to give customers real-time maps and information on when they can be back on, because we see the challenges. So once we finally have someone on site to determine, is it simply a tree across the line? Did a pole snap? I mean, how bad is the problem? And then we're in a position, because we know that particular outage is how many, that wire that's down, how many locations is related to it. And so then when you create your prioritization in terms of how you're going to put things on, start with hospitals and things back. Initially, you can give customers more real-time data, which keeps that on. When are you going to be? When will I be on? When will I be on? Which is incredibly frustrating for people. So the AMI meter provides and I just want to emphasize, it's just the initial wonderful piece of technology. There's so much more that can take place. But yes, it's got tremendous benefits for the consumer as well as for the utility.
Right. Great. I'm sorry for derailing our conversation.
No, that's fine. Perfect. Good question.
Two things that I wanted to also talk about. I want to talk about, in general, the broader use of technologies and how it's driving all of these changes. Yeah. But also, I wanted to talk about this concept of the flat rate utilities. And this is something you and I talked about before. I just found it fascinating. So I'll let you take those in whatever order you want. But those are a couple of things I'd like to share with our audience.
Happy to. So let's talk technology initially. We're in the middle of what's called the fourth industrial revolution.
Mhm.
The first industrial revolution was steam. The second industrial revolution was the assembly line. So think Henry Ford cranking out Model Ts. The third industrial revolution was the introduction of robotics and the internet and the like. And now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which is things like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, which is very big because you've got all these smart devices out there. There's a half a dozen more areas of technology that are playing out in our homes and in industry. And so all of these technologies are coming on stream, and customers are demanding that we use them, and they're wanting to use them in tandem, okay, not just singularly. And so the pace of change of technology today is the slowest that it's going to be over the next 20 years. There's going to be more technological change in the next 20 years than there's been in human history. And so the implications of that sort of speed, that breathtaking transition, obviously leaves companies, individuals with a real quandary in terms of what should we do and what's the prioritization in which we should do it. Okay, and it's understandable. When you ask the question, so that's kind of the general question around technology. You asked about kind of flat rate energy, and I'll use a very simple analogy. If you go back to when I was a kid, and when you wanted to make a long distance phone call, it was going to cost you for every minute that you were on the phone, right? It was going to cost you minutes, right? And so you had to be conscious of how much it cost. Today, most people, not everybody, you play a flat rate and you can talk as much as you want. You play a flat rate and you can text as much as you want. And then think about it from an entertainment point of view. If you have cable coming into your house, you can see all the movies and TV shows that can come across that cable for a flat rate. And you get the internet and you can use as much as you want for a flat rate. So their cost structures in those industries have been what I'd call, using the utility term, their facility fee is quite large, and they don't worry about the day in and day out usage. Today, what you have in the utility industry is a lot of people are paying for their fixed costs through the kilowatt hour charge that the customer is paying, and their facility fee, or what their actual fixed costs are, they're not fully recognizing it. Now, as customers begin to do distributed energy and begin to manage their energy usage significantly different, and your kilowatt hours begin to decline because of that, if you have not thought through, hey, what does it actually cost for me to run my system? You're running huge risks of being out of whack, and then suddenly having to jack up your rates more aggressively on the facility side as these costs come down. And it's something that the AMI meter in particular will help you to manage better. But you also need to get out there and have real conversations with your customers about what their intentions are, so that you are better able to calibrate how your investments need to change, and how your pricing structure, at what rate or pace your pricing structure needs to be modified.
Right. So, how does that fit into the context of usage? So, obviously, we've had, recently with brownouts and things where there's not enough energy. And if we go to more of a flat rate, I think it would encourage more usage. So, how does that play out?
Yeah, and let me be clear. This whole notion of going to a flat rate, I am not predicting that to be a universal, real-time thing in the next few years. That part, I'm not. I'm saying that it's logical to think that we're headed in that direction.
Right.
The issues around brownouts and the like are a different challenge around the shifts in climate, number one, and the fact that we're behind the 8 ball in climate. And we're also behind the 8 ball in our infrastructure investing. And so brownouts and the like are really kind of kind of different from the core technology issues. They're um, they're a huge challenge, um, um, but it's a more general infrastructure question. I think distributed energy can help to ameliorate some of the issues with brownouts because there won't be the same pull on the system. If you go back and think about what happened in Texas with all the freeze,
Right.
I don't know if you paid attention, but Tesla actually came in and applied to become a utility in the state of Texas, okay, with their battery storage and the like. They were in effect saying, hey, we want to get into this marketplace and become a competitor because and I forget what the name of the statewide organization where they have the buying and selling that all failed miserably.
Right.
They see just huge opportunities there, and it's clear to them, given what happened, that customers are like, I don't want this to happen to me again, so I need a different solution. And since
Right.
Tesla's a big storage player, they're like,
Right.
hey, I can help you solve these things.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Okay. Well, let's transition um, to addressing these issues. We've kind of framed this,
Yeah.
this world of constant change, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. Um, how do utilities start to respond to that?
And so the great question, and obviously embracing the fact that technological change is here and that you want to get out ahead of it from a leadership point of view is key. You have to deal with it from the point of view of your people. Okay. I live here in North Carolina, and I enjoy going up to the area around NC State. In North Carolina State University is a big engineering school, and you've got a lot of entrepreneurial companies up there that are developing really cool technologies.
Right.
That if you listen to their sales pitch, you put this in your organization, it'll solve this, it'll solve that, it'll do this, it'll do that, and they all sound wonderful. And I always ask them one question, and I always get the same reaction. I said, so have you had an implementation? Oh, yeah, we had this company, they bought it. And I said, well, how'd the implementation go? And their faces dropped. Oh, my God, it's been a challenge. And it's because the tech without the people are resistant to change. Okay, people are resistant to change. They like the way they did it before. Why are you trying to change this thing around? Why are you disrupting my life? And so implementations are either taking way longer and they're not yielding the sort of benefits that were promised because the workforce is choosing or not been properly trained or motivated to use it the right way. And so everything comes down to your people. And it's remarkable. You can get an organization to spend millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars on new technology, and then they want to argue about why they have to spend the money on the training, and which is pennies in comparison. And so from an organizational point of view, you have got to recognize that you've got tremendous talent that is walking out the door in terms of your baby boomers. And most organizations have not done as adequate a job as they could have in terms of how do you harness that information and keep the knowledge in house. They're struggling universally, and it's not just the utility industry, in terms of the recruiting of good quality people. And in my opinion, they're missing the single biggest selling point that the utility industry have, which is that young people are purpose driven. They like working for organizations that are serving some sort of higher purpose and providing energy to the world or to their country or to their state or community. There's very few purposes that are higher than that. And then with the workforce that they have internally, they're starving them from information. They're not training them. They've not shared with them the clear vision and mission and values and why they're attempting to do what they're doing. And so you've got talent, you've got knowledge leaking out one door. You can't bring new talent in the other door, and then you're starving the people in the middle from knowing exactly what, how, when, whereby they can be more responsive to all this disruption that's taking place. And so those are the pieces and the elements that are really at play. And what I just described is not unique to utilities. Okay, every client we have the same sort of issues. It doesn't matter if we've got some Fortune 100 clients, they're struggling with this, and we've got some entrepreneurial companies that are going through the same sort of issues.
Yeah. So obviously I think you had referred to it as the silver tsunami, which is the baby boomers kind of leaving
Yeah.
the workforce. Maybe talk about the difference between the baby boomers that have made up our core workforce versus the other generations that we're working with
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, so the boomers, and you can put the latchkey kids, which are Generation X, you can kind of put them together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a boomer. We were raised to pay your dues, right? You go into a company, there's a certain process and a progress that you have to take, and over time, you get promoted, you get greater responsibility, and that's the career path that you're operating under. Millennials and Generation Z were raised to think differently. Okay, and every time I go before an audience and people start rolling their eyes and complaining about the millennials and Generation Z, I say, okay, boomers, Gen X, let's identify you all. So, because here's what happened. We, as a collective generation, would turn to the youngest person in the family and we'd say, hey, Betty, hey, Tommy, what do you guys want to do today? And they would say, we want to go here. And the whole family would do what they wanted to do. The youngest person could dictate what an entire family was going to do. And then after having all this privilege and all this voice in the activities, they come into the workforce where the culture is the old mindset of you got to pay your dues. And they're like, wait a minute. My mom and dad didn't care why would I come work for you and you don't care what I think? Right? I've been told that I'm awesome my entire life, and now you're trying to tell me I don't have any value. Well, guess what? I'll go work someplace else. And I had this conversation. There was the 18th Airborne Corps here in the Fayetteville area had a reception. The commanding general had a reception, and I was talking to some of the colonels that were there, and I was saying to them, what we're dealing with now is a need to appreciate the fact that the current workforce, these young folks who say to us, we don't like the fact that you're not giving us responsibility. We don't like they're telling you this is not acceptable. That's better than in my generation, people would come in, they'd be bored, they'd be disinterested, and they would just hang around. And they would be disengaged and not care, and they collect a salary and they would go through the motions. It's a good thing that the workforce is telling you that you need to change. That's a positive, not a negative. It says that you're out of touch with, if you want to recruit, you have to change your mindset, you have to change your processes. And so it really comes down to three things. It comes down to the management of people, technology, and what does your business model look like? And how is that going to work? Those are the three key elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that you had talked about before is you talked about a case study or an example where executives had given a variety of people this particular problem and asked them to solve it. Do you recall the example I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is a behavioral assessment that we had given to a client. So we're really big in using behavioral analysis to help teams operate at high performance. And we've got a really strong relationship with an organization called TTI Success Insights. They're a best-in-class provider of behavioral assessments. And so this was a Fortune 100 company. And we gave their workforce an assessment of what their skill set was. Okay, so imagine on a scale of 0 to 100, we gave them this assessment. And if you kind of look at my visual here, this was kind of the amount of skill. If this is 100, their skills generally was like this. And there were 25 different skills like futuristic thinking, decision making, collaboration, the ability to work with others, problem solve. Those are the sort of questions. And so we gave them the assessment, and they had capabilities like this. And then we went to the managers and we said, on a zero to 100, using the exact same 25 skills, what skills are you looking for from your workforce? So they said, well, this is what we care about. And what you saw was customer service was up to like 100. Okay. And then the rest of the skills were like this. They were like, we really don't care. There was customer service and 2 or 3 other things. And then the rest of the skills that the workforce had were negligible. As a matter of fact, on this side, they didn't care about any of the ones on this side, like futuristic thinking. And then we went to the workforce and we said, okay, you work here. What does your manager want? What skills does your manager care about? And theirs was virtually identical. They were big on customer service. And then they had a few other areas that were important, but on this side, it was all 0. And my point was, okay, you're paying a salary to these folks to come to work every day, and then you don't ask them to use half their brain. And we're in an environment where there's so much change and disruption in the marketplace. You have to leverage the talent and the skills of the people that are coming to work every day. And the statistics, and Gallup does this research every single year, the statistics say about 20% of the workforce is engaged, really cares. About 50% of the workforce is just hanging around, and using the analogy of a boat, the first 20% are rowing, the second 50% are just watching, and the bottom 30% are rowing, 50% are just hanging around, and 20% are literally attempting to sink the boat. They're talking so badly about the organization every day that they're killing the morale and the productivity. And but it's not that they're bad people or that the people watching are bad, but you haven't asked them to do anything. They can do their job in their sleep, right? But there's all these challenges that leadership has. There's all this stuff coming at them, and the workforce doesn't even fully understand what the issue is, what the priority is, and the fact that these are critical elements to keeping their job, the organization being successful.
Right, right. So we've talked about, on the one hand, people are resistant to change, that when you got new technologies, you got new innovations, they're like, leave me alone. On the other hand, we have the workforce is not engaged as much as they would like, and they feel undervalued. So where do these come together, and how do you bring them together?
Yeah. And this is actually where the fun part for us, because there's nothing more wonderful than getting everybody kind of on the same page. Let me draw a sports analogy, and I hope folks will get it. If you don't follow the NFL, my apologies. And on offense, it has 11 players on it, and every person on that field knows what every other person is good at and what they're not good at. They know whether or not the wide receiver is going to come across the middle and catch that ball, knowing they're going to get hit by the defensive back. They know whether or not the quarterback can throw that deep out consistently and hit that receiver. They know which one of the offensive line persons is going to be really good at blocking or who's going to need some help. But in the workforce, people and leaders in particular seem to think that the things that they don't do well, that the workforce doesn't know, that they don't do them well. Everybody knows what everybody does well, but there's not this real conversation about our strengths and weaknesses and how do we buttress our weaknesses and exploit our strengths. Okay, so from a what do we do with it, do about it from an organizational point of view, there's 2 things. Now, let me talk. I laid that groundwork, and I'm going to set that to the side for a minute and talk about what I call the need for line of sight. So from a strategic point of view, what you want is from everywhere from the CEO to the receptionist, assuming that that's the person that's the most junior person inside the organization, You want everybody to understand what the vision is, what the mission is, where the value is, what are the key goals and metrics, so that everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it and where we are right now in terms of that, in terms of our progress toward our goals. And what we find consistently is that organizations don't tell people that. And then once they understand it, then you have to give them the ability to influence it. If they see that we're behind or there's an opportunity to do something better, they've got to feel like, hey, I can at least raise the flag and say, you've shared information with me. I know where you want to go. I now see a way where we can improve, or I now see an issue that if it's not addressed, we'll fall short, so that everybody knows and that information flows dynamically, right? And so we help organizations to make that alignment from the top to the bottom of the organization. And then using the data analysis tools that I was talking about, we help them with their ability to understand each other, appreciate each other, and specific strategies on how to communicate more effectively, and specific areas where, hey, here's certain skills and competencies that need to be developed by individuals. And so then they can step up and say, hey, I think I need development A, B, and C if I'm going to do better at my job. Now that I understand what you all are attempting to get accomplished, I want to get better at A, B, and C. And don't be cheap with the personal development money. It's like you spoon it out like it's some sort of incredibly valuable thing when you want great people. And I've had a client say to me, well, why would I spend money on that person if they might leave? I said, well, would you rather not spend it and they stay? I mean, you can't work, and if you have an engaged workforce, you'll do so much better. And I want to just draw this. I want to tell one quick story about this whole notion for why the value of line of sight. I don't remember exactly where I heard this story, so I probably should be giving credit to somebody that I don't remember where I heard it. So the story goes like this. It's a team building exercise, and the CEO takes the senior leaders to go bowling. Okay, so they all get their bowling shoes. Everybody's lined up. The basic. He put them into teams. The basic idea of bowling idea is you want to bowl 300. So the pins go down, the pins fall, and then you know where your score is. So right before they start playing, the CEO drops a curtain down across the alley so you can't see the pins. And he says, and they look like, what are you doing? He says, just go ahead and bowl. So they grab their bowl, and the first group rolls the ball down, and they hear pins fall. And they look over at the CEO because they can't see what happened. The CEO's on the edge of the curtain. So the CEO knows what happened, but none of the workforce does. And they say, well, what happened? And he says, aim a little to the left. Aim a little bit. Okay, so they all aim a little bit to the left. They roll again. Aim a little bit to the right. Do this, do that. He's giving them all this instruction. He's totally command and control. Do this, do that. And so then they bowl a couple of games, and then the curtain comes up, and they say, how do we do? He says, I'll tell you at the end of the quarter. So not only did they have no ability to truly influence what happened, they had absolutely no appreciation for where they were from a score point of view. And so they're pretty indifferent. And at the end of the quarter, well, guess what? That was last quarter. I can't influence that now.
Right.
So what are you going to do? Tell me to move to the left or move to the right? Or are you going to show me real time what's happening and tell me real time why it's important so that I can real time begin to help the organization do things differently? And in an environment where technology is moving as quickly as it is, where boomers are leaving out of the door, the service tsunami is departing, and we're challenged to bring good people in that want to stay and get engaged, it's time to rethink the way the business model works.
Right. So how do you help organizations to make that transition? Obviously, uh, and actually, before we do that, one of the things that you talked about before that I really liked, and kind of an analogy, obviously there's the resistance of change from the staff, right? And the desire to change from the staff all at the same time. But also at the executive level, right? There's like, one of the things that I've seen and that you've talked about is the idea of risk to the executives and to the management, and how they view um, change. And I think you used the analogy, or I think you talked about it as the white elephant in the room. Maybe you could just elaborate on on change
Sure.
from an executive point of view.
So you have to think about a standard bell-shaped curve that is low here, then it's really fat in the middle, then it gets low again. The statistics say that only 18% of people like new ideas, and so I've done a fair number of presentations, and if there's 100 people if there's 10 people in the room, you already know two of them like it, and those on the backside absolutely would, they're going to try and sabotage uh, in some way. And sabotage, don't take that too literally. They're going to talk down or be resistant to actually making something happen. What we're really dealing with here is the dynamic where the people in the room, be they leaders or staff, believe that the status quo or things not changing is a safer scenario for them versus the change. And what's important, and this is why doing a strategic conversation where people can say, well, let's look at the landscape. What's happening in the marketplace today? So that we have a really good appreciation for who's the competitors, probably not the same one that you've historically had. What are all these dynamics that are playing out, which is why you need to think dynamically, whereby the leaders and the staff really appreciate, wow, crap, it doesn't look like I can just keep doing what I'm doing and keep my job or keep my organization the way I want, or it's going to be a better bet for me personally, professionally, organizationally, for me to, in effect, accept the fact that change is necessary. And so it's really key. The white elephant in the room is only 18% of the people want the new idea. So when you introduce something, you have to know that 80% of the people that you're talking to are saying, I don't know why I should do that. And so you have to have developed strategies and tactics to identify some champions, to pull some influential naysayers into the conversation, because frequently people who hate ideas, if you ask, say, look, I know you hate this, but help me, look at where the world is going. We can't stay here. Have them to appreciate it, because then once a couple of strategic naysayers say, guys, we have to move, everybody notices, oh, they said we've got to move. Well, then we must really need to move. And so dealing with the human dynamic is partially what we accomplish through behavioral assessments. It's partially what we accomplish through having organizations do landscape analysis and the like. And so I'm just going to go ahead and answer your next question. He says, so what do we do? Right? Okay, so the customer's got these issues. What do we do?
Yep.
You have to start with, okay, what's the environment that you're operating in? So let's do a real landscape. And it's more than just what you all personally think. When you're in the arena, you really don't have the perspective. So we've got to take that holistic ecosystem perspective, and it's the sort of stuff that we geek out on. I've got a couple of partners with PhDs. Matter of fact, I'm just about the only person who doesn't have a PhD that is inside the organization. So what we're dealing with is, let's get an ecosystem perspective on what we're dealing with. And then within that context, what does the future look like from the point of view of your company? And something that we've said frequently with utilities today is, are you going to lead? Are you going to be a fast follower, or do you need to get out of the way? Okay. If you're going to lead, well, then there's a whole new perspective on what you need to do differently. And we can take you down that path, and we've got to help you to bring your workforce. If you want to be a fast follower, you can't just follow. You got to fast follow. You need a repository of knowledge. There's all these things you need to do so that you can stay on top of. I don't want to be bleeding edge. I might not want to be leading edge, but I want to be right behind them. How do I take those steps? We love talking to organizations about that. And then we really think there's a bunch of organizations that are just not going to be able, they don't have the size, the capital, or whatever. So let's strategically begin to think about, how do I exit? How do I maximize the value? How do I protect my shareholders? How do I protect my community? what are the things that we should do? But they're conversations that we need to be having now. And what we're finding that leadership is slow to appreciate the technological change. They're slow to react to the fact that they're having talent challenges. And they tend to think in a linear fashion when we're dealing with dynamic elements that are taking place. And so we've done a wonderful job of developing these things. We've done some of this work in the auto industry, just to pick an industry that everybody knows that they're literally going from the combustion engine and a drivetrain, which has been their bread and butter for 140 years or something, to an autonomous vehicle that doesn't go put, 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 put when you press on the gas. And so re-envisioning these things and how it exactly works is really the key. That's the how. The steps are fairly straightforward. Dealing with it from an individual client basis is really where the exciting part is.
Mhm. Okay. Can you give us any specific examples of some utilities that you've worked with that have made some pretty significant changes?
Well, we just got finished doing some strategic work with an organization called Electricities, and they have they basically are the association for the utilities in the state of North Carolina. And in the midst of us working on their strategic plan, their CEO appropriately said, "You know what? What we see happening here is way out ahead of where we think our members are. We have to bring them along, whereby they understand this sense of urgency at a different level." And so what they did was they took their annual meeting, and instead of it being kind of a typical, hey, we're going to have a speaker on this and that or the other, they said, okay, from the jump, we're going to talk to you about what we see the future of this industry looking like. And we want you all to think about what your individual utilities need to look like over the next by 2030. And over 3 days, took the entire membership through a process that's a mini version of a little bit of what I said. And it put the policymakers in together. They put the city managers together, because this is the municipal space, and then the utility managers together, and had polls and conversations and strategy conversation about what should happen, and then kind of brought us back 2 or 3 times during that process to say, okay, this is what each group sees. Where's the sense of urgency? Who's got the priority? And so, walked away with a clearer consensus from the entire membership, which again are the utilities in the state from the municipal point of view, as to where they need to go. So now you're able to go into them, and you're not starting from ground zero. You're starting from the perspective that, okay, we've got to make a couple of critical decisions about what the future looks like.
Right. So you're framing the questions and the problems together, and rather than just, okay, top down, this is what we're doing, or this is what's happening, this is quite this more of a collaborative approach. Is that what I'm understanding?
What you're understanding is that you've created what I call a shared consciousness among the membership that didn't exist before. You created a shared consciousness between the policymaker, the city manager, and the utility manager, if you had them from all the same utility. Because, going back to this conversation we had about, the elephant in the room and people not liking change, you've got policymakers, and again, I'm talking in municipal environment, they're running, at least here in the state of North Carolina, every 2 years. And while the utilities is part of their portfolio, the bulk of their portfolio is fire, police, public safety, parks and rec, customer, citizen complaints. And so this utility is kind of off here to the side. Now, this utility is a critical component, and frequently it's generating profits and extra cash flow for the city that they're dependent on and think is good and stable, when in reality it's at risk. But
Right.
and then you got the city manager who's sitting there, and the city manager is like, hey, I think this could be important, but that's not the priority for the people I work for.
Right.
So to get everybody to kind of have that alignment, again, that's that line of sight. that's that line of sight up and down, and it was done on a very broad basis, brilliantly by electric cities, to get people on the same page. And so I think that's a perfect and kind of that just happened in the last 45 days
Okay.
as a great example of some of the stuff we had done earlier in the year that bore some really good fruit just recently.
Great. Okay. Well, so Darsweil, we've talked a lot about different things. We talked about the state of the industry and what's changing and the problems that it's created. We've talked about the workforce and how that's important to affect our change and to improve what we're doing in the future. And we've talked a little bit about the process. Is there anything else that you would like to address or to talk about with our guests?
Well, I think the main thing, first off, is I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I've enjoyed the conversation. And for the record, we met at the American Public Power Association conference. And so that's number one. Number two, let me just acknowledge the fact that, the electric utility industry is at the epicenter of everything that happens in the world. You can't even have water without electricity, okay? Because you need electricity to run the pumps to get the water to your house or to your business. So it is incredibly mission critical that this industry recognize and that consumers recognize the value that it brings. I think that the main point that I'm attempting to convey is that there are competitors coming for your customer that don't have a legacy of infrastructure. They don't have a legacy of culture that says that, hey, what happened today is going to happen tomorrow. I mean, the notion that, oh, this change is similar to when air conditioners came on stream. I've actually had somebody suggest that, yeah, air conditioners came on stream 40 years ago or whatever it is, and we'll have to adjust like to air conditioners. Or EVs coming on stream is actually just going to increase our revenue stream. So if anything, we're going to make more revenue. You're just missing the dynamics of the entire technology that you can bring to bear. Taking it to the nth degree, your smart device is going to be connected to your phone. So when everybody leaves the house, they're going to turn off everything that's not running. So all those scripts you have that are, for the TV or for this or the clock that's running on your microwave and on your oven, they're going to come up with some way to say, there's nobody here, shut that stuff down. And then when you get closer to the house, they'll say, uh-oh, I need to kick the AC back on, or I had it way up, I got to bring it down to the temperature that they like. And when there's a peak period, if your car is out in the garage, they're gonna say, I'm going to shut off they charge the battery on the car overnight, and they're going to shut off the energy coming from the utility and drain the battery on the car because they know based on your habits you're not going to leave for a while. All right, so these are the sort of evolutionary things that are closer than people appreciate. And I would say, why not be out ahead of this? Why not at least have conversations? Why not at least do a landscape so that versus you speculate as to where it is that you need to be? And so I think that those are the key things I would leave in terms of thoughts, in terms of what people should be considering. And needless to say, the work that you guys do is greatly appreciated from Unearth Labs perspective, and we appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you guys.
All right, Darsweil, we appreciate you having on the fireside chat as well. We had a couple of delays there, so I'm glad that we got it together here. This has been very good. So, and again, on behalf of the Unearth team, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with everybody again in our next fireside chat. Thanks so much. Take care.